Hello guys, Brad here again with another video. Today I want to talk about something a little bit different, and it's something that I haven't seen anybody else talk about. It's just something I sort of came up with on my own. I'm going to call this fragrance shaming. Now, most of us are familiar with a concept called body shaming. I think this happened recently to Kelly Ripa. I remember she was on the beach wearing a bathing suit, and she's like in her 40s, and people were making fun of her, saying that she was too old to be wearing a bathing suit, that she looked like a boy or whatever. And, that was considered body shaming. But I think that same concept applies to people that wear fragrances in one way, shape, or form. So I came up with 10 different things that can be associated with fragrance shaming. So let me get through my list and talk a little bit about each one. First one I'm going to call cologne guy shaming. Now, this can happen to anybody, anytime really. You wear a fragrance to work or you're out and about, and people shame you simply for wearing a fragrance. Maybe it's too strong, or maybe it doesn't smell right, or it smells bad. People make fun of you. You're trying to get attention. Maybe they think you're gay or something. Some way they're going to shame you simply for wearing a fragrance. It's unfortunate, because especially when you're a guy, because I think women tend to get away with a lot more when it comes to fragrances than guys, because I think people expect a woman to wear perfume, but a lot of people don't really accept men wearing fragrances quite as much. So I think there's a lot of cologne guy shaming out there, but that's just one form of shaming that I came up with. There's 9 others. I'm going to talk about another one, number 9. I'm going to say body spray shaming. Now, a lot of people in this fragrance community really look down on body sprays. Axe or Bodman, they're cheap, and they can maybe even smell a little bit bad. But a lot of people love them. They're pretty popular, especially with the high school crowd. So people that wear body sprays can be shamed a lot, especially in the fragrance community. And to each their own. I mean, I don't really wear body sprays, but I don't really fault anybody for wearing a body spray. I don't think I've really ever condemned body sprays on my channel. So, if you make fun of people that wear body sprays, that is a form of body shaming. Number 8, I call this negative review shaming. Now, this is something that has affected me quite a bit. I have a tendency to give a lot of fragrances mediocre or poor scores, and it has come back to haunt me a little bit. People don't like it when you say bad things about popular fragrances like La Nuit or Aventus. Now, I happen to love Aventus. La Nuit, it's grown on me a little bit, but I think when I reviewed it, I didn't give it a really spectacular score or anything. If you ever review a fragrance that the community as a whole seems to love, you're probably going to hear some negative things. You have a broken nose, you don't know what you're talking about. Get off YouTube. You're not a good reviewer, that kind of thing. There's also something I would call positive review shaming, and this is something that recently came back to haunt a lady from Australia named Demi Rawling. She did a video talking about her top 10 favorite fragrances for men, and her number 1 fragrance happened to be Pacific Rock Moss, a fragrance not many people knew about. So a lot of people went out and blind bought it, and when it turned out to be less than they expected, they started making fun of the poor girl. They said she was, not that attractive, or she wore too much makeup, or whatever. And that's unfortunate, because, she seems like a sweet girl, and she just gave her thoughts on the fragrance. It was up to the person watching the video to decide whether or not to buy it or not. Just because a pretty girl or, an influential young man recommends a fragrance doesn't mean you have to rush out and blind buy it. You should do your research before you do that. Number 6, I'm going to call this storage shaming. A lot of people in the fragrance community are really big into proper storage, whether it's a big cabinet with the glass and the wood, or maybe a wine cooler, something like that. Some people just throw their fragrances in a medicine cabinet or something like that. And I still remember Ash, when he did his infamous video pulling fragrances out of the medicine cabinet. I'm sure a lot of people were appalled that he kept his fragrances in the medicine cabinet. No, he's not the only one. People probably keep their fragrances in all kinds of weird places, maybe even in the glove compartment of your car or something. It's appalling if you're a fragrance fanatic, but for the average Joe, it's not something you really think about. So this is something that you can be shamed for, just improper storage of a fragrance. Number 5, I'm going to say shaming for owning decants, testers, and samples. Now, I can think of a perfect example of this. There's a fragrance that John Varvatos released years back called Rock Volume 1, and I happen to have a tester bottle of this fragrance. But if you go on eBay right now and you try to buy a bottle of Rock Volume 1, there's a couple sellers wanting $2,500 or more for that fragrance, which is outlandish and completely ridiculous. But there's another seller selling vial samples, like a case of vial samples, which would give you probably about 50 mLs of juice for under $100. So which one do you think is the better deal? The vials or the bottle? I would go with the vials, but people might shame you if they saw that you owned a case of 50 vials. They would probably shame you for not going out and buying the bottle, even though the bottle is not, an economical option. Or people that just, buy decants, they might be shamed for not buying the bottle. People feel upset when they spent $200 for a fragrance and they know somebody else can have that same fragrance for $20. Even though it's the same juice, it's just in a different size, and you can be shamed for it. And tester, same thing. It's not in the original box, a little cheaper. The presentation is not the same, but you can be shamed for that too. Collection size shaming is number 4. In this day and age, a collection can be as big as you want it to be. There's no cutoff or limit to the number of fragrances in your collection. So if you have 50 fragrances, maybe you're shamed by the guy that has 100 fragrances. You have 100 fragrances, you're shamed by the guy that has 500, and so on. So, your collection size can be a source of shaming as well. Number 3, I'm going to say designer/niche fragrance shaming. Now, I consider this a two-way shaming. If you're the type of person that only likes designer fragrances, you could be shamed by the niche community because you don't buy the expensive, luxurious fragrances like they do. Of course, if you're a designer head, you're going to think of the niche heads as being snobbish, and more interested in, expensive taste and presentation than actually smelling good. So that shaming can work both ways for that one. So I combine those two into one form of shaming. Number 2, backup bottle shaming. This is an interesting one too. Like, for example, if you owned 5 bottles of pure malt, people would think you were nuts. You could be shamed for that. But at the same time, let's say you waited until pure malt was discontinued to buy it, and then I remember at one point, people were selling 20% full bottles of pure malt for maybe $100. People would shame you for that too. I mean, why pay all that money for a used bottle that's almost empty, right? So shaming for backups can work either way, because you bought too many backups, or because you didn't buy a backup and then you got lulled into buying a very expensive bottle or partial bottle off of eBay. And finally, I'm going to talk about knockoff fragrance shaming. We all know about houses like DUA and Alexandria. They make these knockoff clones. I haven't really tried any of their fragrances, so I can't say, in my opinion, how well they reproduce these scents, but I'm sure people will shame people for buying those types of fragrances because they are knockoffs and they are merely duplicates of an authentic fragrance. Of course, the same can apply to Aventus clones as well. You spend $300 on Aventus, and then some guys showing off saying, hey, I bought this clone for $20, and they're going to be shamed too because they didn't buy the real deal. So those are 10 types of fragrance shaming situations that I came up with. I think this would be a great item for discussion or topic, or maybe even response video. So please take that into consideration. If you have a channel of your own, you want to give your own take. If you think fragrance shaming is a big thing in the community right now, especially the new community with all the competition among the reviewers and the subscribers, trying to outdo each other and everything. So that's it for today. Thank you all for watching, and I will talk to you later.